The High Priestess doesn't shout. She waits. She watches. She knows. She's the gatekeeper of the hidden things, what's beneath the surface, what must be felt before it can be said. Since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in 2022, we've been living in a country where bodily autonomy is no longer a guaranteed right, where freedom is argued in the abstract, while women bleed in silence. In June 2025, a nurse named Adriana Smith became the face of that silence. Pregnant, brain-dead, held on life support by a state law that said her fetus had more personhood than she did. Her name, her story, her breath became a battleground, not for justice, but for jurisdiction. Because here's the truth we're rarely taught. The myth of liberty was never built for all. From the very founding of this nation, Black personhood was denied because it disrupted the economic engine of slavery. Women's voices were denied because they disrupted the patriarchal order. The Constitution didn't forget us, it excluded us. And those in power now, they want us to more fully return to the Constitution's original sins. I'm Alice. Follow me down this rabbit hole. You've seen her before, though perhaps not by that name. She appears as Persephone, as Artemis, as Isis. On the Kabbalistic tree of life, the High Priestess represents Da'at, the direct path from the seen world to source energy itself. She is the quiet watcher at the veil of the mystery, seated between the pillars of Solomon's temple, Yakin and Boaz, the pillar of establishment and the pillar of strength. She is the third path, the bridge, the breath between binaries. The High Priestess is draped in blue, crowned like Isis, the crescent moon at her feet, pomegranates behind her like scattered seeds of forbidden knowledge. In the Rider-Waite Smith deck, she wears the solar cross, rooted in the rhythms of the earth. She is not the power that dominates. This is a power that endures. She guards the threshold between worlds, the conscious and the subconscious, the seen and the unseen. Her domain is mystery. Her method is silence that speaks volumes. Upright, she invites us inward into the hidden realms of intuition, self-trust, and the quiet knowing. She tells us not all wisdom shouts, not all truth is visible, but it is no less real. She reminds us that truth doesn't always arrive in a headline. Sometimes it shows up in the pit of the stomach, the prickle on the skin, the knowing you can't explain. But reversed, she is all that goes unheard, the knowledge suppressed, the body unheeded, the cost of ignoring the inner voice. When the High Priestess is reversed, it is not just spirit that suffers, it is the flesh. She becomes the cautionary tale, the red flag dismissed, the woman's pain downplayed, the nurse's body legislated. Adriana was a mother, a nurse, a woman, but in the eyes of the law, she was reduced to a vessel. Her brain-dead body held on life support. For 4 months, she was in legal limbo. Her family silenced. Her autonomy erased. This is what happens when the sacred feminine is desecrated, when power values potential life more than living breath. The High Priestess reverses the system refusing to listen, even when the truth is screaming through the quiet. It's the spiritual cost of denying a person's knowing. When we legislate a person's body, we silence the intuition that should be sovereign. And we replace the High Priestess's crown with a gag. She is no longer the guardian at the veil, but the one behind it, stripped of a voice, made into a symbol, and misused. This is not myth. This is policy. It's what happens when we mistake silence for sanctity, when we build temples on the backs of women and call them altars. The High Priestess calls us back to the questions we'd rather avoid. Who gets to speak? Who gets heard? Who becomes the sacrifice when the world refuses to trust the wisdom of the body? The High Priestess is not gone. She is waiting, and she is watching. Long before Adriana, there was Phyllis. Phyllis Wheatley was stolen from West Africa as a child and sold into slavery in Boston. But even in bondage, her mind was luminous. She learned English, Latin, Greek. She devoured scripture and the classics, and she wrote poetry that confounded the very men who claimed she was their property. She wrote, "Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolical dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train." She was a contradiction that the nation didn't want to reckon with. A young black woman, enslaved, yet brilliant, erudite, divine. White colonists didn't believe she could have written her poems. She was put on trial, not in a court of law, but a tribunal of white men, including the governor of Massachusetts, to prove that she was the author of her own work. Imagine that. A teenage girl enslaved, being interrogated by powerful men for having a mind that was too refined. And she won. Her words were published, her verses were read in England and the colonies. She shattered expectations, and she did it in perfect meter. But even then, her life was marked by fragility. After being freed, she died young, impoverished, bearing her children and her dreams alike. And yet her words remain, a trace of the High Priestess who dared speak beneath the myth of freedom. And if this story has lit something up for you, please do go ahead and like the video. It tells the algorithm that these stories matter. Adriana Smith entered the hospital unconscious. By the time doctors declared her brain dead, she was 10 weeks pregnant, but Georgia's fetal personhood law didn't allow her to die. Her body became an incubator. Her family couldn't speak for her because the law already had. 4 long months, her body was kept alive by machines, not for healing, but to gestate the fetus she'd never get to meet. Her family watched helplessly as the woman, mother, daughter they loved turned into a vessel. Her mother in particular described watching her daughter on the breathing machines as torture. The hospital's hands were tied. The state had spoken, and chance her son was born prematurely by C-section, just under 2 pounds. He lives, but the cost was and is monumental. And Adriana's story is not an isolated tragedy. It's a warning. It is the echo of every law that places ideology over empathy, control over care. It's what happens when the state confuses faith with governance, policy with morality. When the High Priestess is ignored, her sacrifice becomes profane. Her body, her story, became an altar on which the illusion of righteousness was upheld at the expense of her humanity. And in the hush of the machines, that silence wasn't holy. It was haunting. The High Priestess reversed is the desecration of sacred knowing. It's what happens when the law ignores lived reality, when power refuses to listen. The founding myth says all are created equal. Wheatley asked, "Then why am I not free?" Adriana's body asked, "Then why am I not human?" In both, we see the same silence demanded, the same truth unspoken, the same knowledge refused. The High Priestess is the voice in the dream you try to forget, the whisper under the roar, the truth you bury because it's inconvenient. And yet, she remains, not broken, not gone, but coiled like breath, like grief, like a poem waiting to be read aloud. But the High Priestess reversed is not the end of the story. She is the edge, the moment before the veil tears, the question before the uprising. And what we do next? That's the real reading. The myth of liberty is powerful, but it is also fragile. Phyllis Wheatley cracked it open with a quill. Today, we do it with protest, policy, and relentless truth-telling. Women, particularly Black women, have always been the spine of the American conscience. Yet we are still asked to prove our pain, our power, our place. What happens when we say no more? What happens when the High Priestess stands, not silent, but sovereign? We speak, we march, we fund abortion access, we organize doula networks, we uplift maternal health, we demand legislation that protects rather than punishes. Change doesn't wait for permission. It begins in the choices we make every day. And this is how we take the power back, one act at a time. First, we can start here. We can help Adriana Smith's family as they battle with the costs of an oppressive government overreach. Her mother, April Newkirk, has a GoFundMe to help defray the hospital bills and medical interventions forced upon their family. We can also support maternal health through volunteering with, donating to, or supporting organizations like Black Mamas Matter Alliance, or the Feminist Center for Reproductive Liberation, or other organizations that train, support, and build systems of care. Your voice matters. Your time matters. Your money matters. If we each do what we can to support maternal health, we can turn this around. The High Priestess does not demand attention, but she does demand truth. Phyllis Wheatley knew Adriana Smith deserved better. So I ask you, what truths are still waiting to be heard? What silences have we mistaken for peace? Speak, organize, protect, and remember, the myth is not enough, but we are real. And we have the real impact on the next chapter.